All right, so we're going to be finding our melting point for the first two substances here. And the first two substances are going to be these white powders. Did my best to sort of get them ground up into as fine of a powder as possible because we got to get them into these little tiny capillary tubes. So remember that a capillary tube is basically like the world's smallest test tube, right? So if we kind of take a look at this, you can see that it's just a really small thin glass tube. Let me see if I can get that to focus there. There we go. It's a tiny little opening that we have there. And then the other side is closed. And so I'm going to try and get the powder all the way down into the bottom of this, which is a little bit difficult for us to do. But the way that we do this is we just take the open end here and we start stabbing it. So once I start stabbing it, we can see that we start to get like a little bit of the powder in the bottom here. And so now if we flip it over, we have to try and get the powder to the bottom of the test tube or the capillary tube. And so the way that we do that is we just do that by tapping it on the surface. So we usually just take like a hollow piece of glass tubing or something, and then you can just drop it. And if I've got this stuff ground up enough, it'll go down. Sometimes if it's, too big and chunky, it kind of gets stuck up in the top there and it doesn't want to go, but it looks like we're getting some. Got a little bit of a chunk stuck up there at the top, but looks like we've got quite a bit that came down, which is good for me. So we take a look, and now in the bottom, let's see if we can get that to show up there. Yep. We've got a good little amount there, so that's A. Now we're just going to do the same thing again for B. Hopefully we don't have too big and chunky of pieces here. It's going down. There we go. So we've got this one all packed now. And so we're going to move over to the Bunsen burner. So at this point we're all set up for the Thiel tube. Unfortunately we don't have any of the fancy melting point sensors at the school. They're actually pretty expensive. Kind of a combination of a heating element and a microscope in one makes them pretty expensive, but we get really good data from these if we just take our time with it. So the Thiel tube is working off of convection currents. So we have the heat here, the heat's warming up in the arm and it's blowing across our sample here, and in the background we've got the thermometer set up. So we'll just go ahead and zoom in, and you guys should be watching that sample and the temperature. So we're looking to see when that sample starts to melt and finishes melting. A lot of times it's pretty close. It's hard to tell a window, and that's okay, but it'll give us an idea. And then in the background here, we're going to be watching the temperature that it's at. So nice little window there. If you caught it when it first started to melt, it started to just get a little bit clear all the way through when it's gone. All right, so I recooled the liquid back down. I dumped out the hot water. I put some fresh water in it, and I switched over to sample letter B now. And so we're heating up for sample B. All right, looks like that one's all taken care of too. Okay, so we've got the setup again. We've moved on to unknown letter C. And for this particular one, it's a liquid to start. So our setup has to be a little bit different. So we're still in the Thiel tube. And this time we have another test tube that I've strapped to the thermometer. And so inside of that, I've put one of our capillary tubes in upside down. So if you paid attention in the videos I showed you, we know that we're looking for a pretty steady stream of bubbles to start coming out around this area here. We know that we're going to occasionally get a bubble that comes out just because of as the temperature of that gas inside is expanding, it's going to start pushing them out. But we want to look for a pretty steady stream of bubbles, and when that steady stream of bubbles hits, we will shut off the heat and we'll let it cool a little bit. And when we can see that liquid rise back up in our capillary tube, we know that we've got our boiling point there. So we're just being patient at this point. So we can see that we are getting some bubbles that are coming out over on the left-hand side of this capillary tube, but they're not really hitting big. So we're starting to get a little faster here now. We can see that it's starting to get a lot more constant over here, but it's still not really going fast enough to be what we're looking for here. Okay. So we're really starting to see it go now. I'm seeing some bubbling up at the top over here and everything. So I think this is pretty much a boil now, right? This looks like a little mini boil. So we're going to turn the heat off. And so we should start cooling down. We want these bubbles to stop. So we like to do it on the way down so that we don't confuse the bubbles with just the heating of the gas inside with the expansion that comes along with it. So we want these bubbles to stop. When these bubbles stop, we'll start to see a little bit of that liquid go back inside the capillary tube. We know that's right where we're at. So I don't see it going back up inside, but I definitely don't see any bubbles anymore. Oh, you can see it. It's starting to rise back up. We can see that at the bottom. So it stopped a little bit ago. So we definitely know we're done. Okay, at this point we are moving on to unknown letter D. Unknown letter D. Okay, so at this point, looks like we've got a pretty steady stream. I'm going to turn the temperature off so that the Bunsen burner is off now. So we're going to see if we can get it to stop boiling, stop bubbling, and that's when we'll record. Once again, so that we're not confused about what's just expanding gas and what's actually boiling. Okay. We are now on to our last sample. I tried to speed things up for you guys and I continued heating it while I was changing the sample out. I knew this one had a little bit higher. So we are now looking at letter E, looking for the boiling point here. Sorry, I was heating it up and now I turned it down too much and now it started to cool. All right, and that'll do that. We're all finished up there.